I'm Elihu Abrahams, physicist. I mean,
That's appropriate.
yeah.
What kind of physicist?
I do what's called condensed matter physics, which for the people who don't keep up with the terminology, used to be called solid state physics, which has to do with essentially the fundamental properties of matter.
Is even that term, condensed matter, is that really a good idea or just convenient?
No, it's a good idea in the sense that by condensed matter we mean what are the properties of enormous numbers of elementary particles when they form aggregates, such aggregates as you're familiar with in your daily life.
And even though it's a little fuzzy, do you remember when you first came?
Well, I have an upper limit to when we first came was 1966, and I cannot remember whether we came 1 year before that, but I'm sure I was here in 1966.
So Bob Wilson wasn't in the winds at all at that time?
Well, he wasn't. I only met him some years after that when he occasionally would come to visit in the summer. Mm-hmm. But I was not here when he was here for any lengthy period.
Mm-hmm. 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 That's a little section of the history that's often underestimated in when he built Fermilab design.
You mean when Hilbert was built? Yeah. When I first came, Hilbert was here already. Hilbert and Stranahan were both here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Were you, kind of a rough question, but at the time you came, what was your position in physics? Were you well underway or were you getting started?
Let's see, in 1966, I don't know, I guess I was probably an associate professor. I suppose I had tenure at that point.
Mm-hmm. And this is, sorry, it's a Snoopy question, but it has something to do with how the center
wait
built.
a minute.
Might have been earlier than that.
50, no, yeah, I had tenure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And therefore, did you have a portable summer salary?
I had summer salary in 1966, yeah.
Apparently most all the early timers did. What did you expect when you first came? What brought you?
Oh, well, actually, I was encouraged to come by David Pines, who is another interviewee, and I think our idea was to make more activity in condensed matter physics at the center, which was at that time dominated by particle physicists. So there were very few non-particle theorists who were attending the center in the 60s, in the mid-60s. And so David was one of the few who was not a particle physicist, and he was encouraging various people to come to build up condensed matter physics here, and I was one of those. So I came at that time with the expectation that I would have a profitable summer scientifically, and that I would meet a lot of interesting people, and that if I liked it, which I, of course, obviously did, I would be encouraging people I knew to come to build up a strong activity in condensed matter physics.
Now, because I was in the semiconductor field, there were a lot of solid state physicists, and I'm thinking probably late 50s, not that much more earlier. And they were all applying, they weren't doing really very basic research. Were they a separate group almost? The people who were making transistors work?
Oh, yeah, well, since the development of semiconductor devices in the early 50s, then there were huge numbers of people who were doing applied work on semiconductors, and I would agree. I think they sort of were a different category from the people that had done the basic science.
Driven to make something work rather than to understand nature. Yeah. Was there much structure here of the scientific program then?
No.
Did you like that?
There were no workshops in the beginning. Mm-hmm. Did I like it? Yes, I liked it. Well, it's a mixed bag. It's very stimulating to have topical focused workshops, and it's also very nice if there are interesting people here, not to be organized into any sort of schedule of having to go to talks or anything like that, and to just work one-on-one or two-on-one and collaborate in that way. It's also nice to work by yourself here.
But that discipline collaboration's harder now, I guess, by far.
Well, that's the history of science, is always been that way, right? Science becomes more and more fragmented, and I think it does that because that's how scientific progress is made. Mm-hmm. Scientific successes are made, and that almost mandates that there be more diversity and more disciplines in science. And so I think as time goes on, and it's certainly true if you look back in history, interdisciplinary activities are much more difficult. Yeah.
And the problems are more challenging and require focusing?
I'm sorry?
The challenges are more difficult, so they have to be focused on more.
Well, I don't know. When people were faced with the problems of explaining atomic physics, which led to the development of quantum mechanics, that was certainly a very challenging problem, very difficult one. I wouldn't say the ones now are more difficult, they're different.
So you don't
I mean, for me they're more difficult, but I watch these kids who were so smart and could do things I could never imagine doing. But for them, I'm not sure it's more difficult than it was for me when I was their age.
Yeah. Is the nature of it different, do you think? The nature of physics today?
No, I don't think the nature is different. I don't think what defines what's an interesting problem or what defines the scientific process is very different. The techniques are different, and the details of the questions are totally different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Seems to me the experiments are a lot bigger and require many more people than used to be.
Well, I think now that they're both kinds of experiments. There's still wonderful experiments that are done by two people in a little lab, but at the same time, with these technological developments of big machines, we can do other kinds of fantastic experiments that require lots of people. Mm-hmm. But both are.
In the early days, do you remember having to do things like paint the place? And was that fun to do?
No, I didn't paint, but when we built Bethe, we moved the library. That I remember very clearly. And the library used to be over there in Hilbert, in a little room, and we got that big library in the new building. And I can't remember what year that was built, but we all chipped in and moved all the books, and that I remember. But other people did paint, I know that.
Do you think the newcomers miss out a little of that sweat equity?
Yes, I think it's bad for the newcomers and it's bad for the center because they, well, some of them, not all of them, but some of them tend to treat it as sort of a hotel. And whereas the spirit before was everybody chipped in to clean up the place and so forth and so on, and that doesn't happen so much now.
Where did you live in the early days?
Well, I only remember two places. I think the place where we lived in 1966 was this little Victorian on 6th Street, which is still there. A little red Victorian at 6th and maybe Hallam or something like that. And that was in the days when we had a lot of houses for participants. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that's one place I remember. And the only other place I remember from the early times was a condo over on Original. But
you've been here an awful lot. I mean, you're here every year.
I'm here essentially every year for the last 30 years.
Has the Aspen Center for Physics made a difference in your professional career?
Oh, yes, absolutely. An enormous difference, just in terms of contacts even, mm-hmm. just in terms of people with whom I've interacted, places I've gone to visit, all which were facilitated by my having been here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Aside from being stimulated to do interesting physics problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you been Were you drawn by the idea of mountains? Are you a climber or just a hiker?
I'm a hiker. But I wasn't a hiker before I came here.
Have you noticed that funny connection between physics and mountains?
No.
Okay.
I know it's mentioned a lot, but
Oh, it is. Okay.
well, yeah. I mean, there are these stories that you go up to Castle Peak and you look at the sign-up sheet there, and 30% of the people were at one time at the physics center. But that's
Which is way out of proportion to the number of people.
Of course.
That are here. Outside of physics, who do you think helped the center in the early days?
in the early days.
Yeah, in and around peripheral to the physicists.
Well, I don't know. The only people I can think of that at some early stage were helping us were the DeWolfs, and
Pretty small.
and well, Carol Ann Jacobson was very helpful in the early days.
And the staff it probably was Sally, I'm guessing?
Oh yeah, do you mean to include the staff?
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
suppose, yeah.
Well, I mean, Sally was fantastic.
Uh-huh.
I mean, she I think more than anybody else, determined, even including physicists, determined the character of the center.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Were you involved at all when we got the territory away from the Institute? Put the wrong way, I mean, when the Institute kindly gave us the territory.
Well, I was involved when the Institute first started to have discussions with the city. That was during the years when I was president. First started having discussions with the city on trying to build something down at the Meadows, and when all of this business all started, when the Circle of Serenity, the famous Circle of Serenity, which is supposed to surround the Physics Center, was established in these arduous negotiations between the city, the Physics Center, the Music Associates, and Hans Contrup, right?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I was.
Subsequently, Hadid and his people too were just changing over almost at that time.
Yeah, by that time I wasn't any longer the president.
Did it surprise you, or did it go as you expected that we would wind up in this pretty nice arrangement?
Oh, I thought right from the beginning that it would take maybe 15 years, which I think it probably did, that we would finally get the land. I didn't see that there could be any alternative.
You mean on their part, that they would have to do this for us?
Yeah.
When you first came in the early times, did you anticipate this would become as prestigious and as important as it has?
Well, I thought it was pretty prestigious at the time because I knew that a number of outstanding scientists were coming here.
So you could well anticipate,
Yeah.
when you were president, for instance, you could well expect that it
Yeah.
would continue. There have been some questions about size. If the housing, for instance, was a disaster, that's an if, and the Physics Center actually had to shrink a bit, would that be, is it about the right size or a little too big or too small?
I don't think it. I think it's at the upper limit. I don't think it should get any bigger. And of course we have sort of a commitment not to make it any bigger.
Well, and physically we're stuck with it too.
Yeah.
But suppose we had to shrink by 30%, would that be very painful?
30%. That would bring us down to of order 50 participants instead of 78 participants or something like that. Yeah, I think it would be. Yeah, I mean, that's if we got down to 65, I don't think that would be much of an issue. But getting down in the low 50s, I think, would not be good for the science at the center.
So it's actually fairly tuned.
Yeah, I think
Fairly
so.
tuned.
Yeah.
Probably a result of human nature. I just guessed that Neanderthal man found that was the right number too. Well, you still bear quite a bit of responsibility and it's been a long time. How long have you been involved in feeling responsible for the center?
Well, ever since I became a general member, or we didn't call it that in those days, we were trustees, which must have been in the late 60s or 1970 or something like that. So I felt responsible for 30 years.
Not too painful, though.
No, it's been very enjoyable, because not only because the people you work with are really nice and interesting, but everything we've done has turned out to be so nice, right? So it's very, very rewarding to have made a contribution to it.
It's just a personal observation that we're in better shape spiritually in terms of pizzazz or something like that than ever before.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with what's going on in physics.
Right.
And these are very, very exciting times in a number of fields of physics. In fact, exciting in the three major fields that we have at the center, in astrophysics, particle physics, and condensed matter physics. There are just wonderful things happening in all those three fields. And so I think that's
And we're past our physical insecurity. Which we
yes,
had
way
plenty of.
past. Yes, no, the new building has been just wonderful. Everybody loves it.
So you, incidentally, some of the others did not feel this way, anticipated that the center would become as important as it is. Sort of.
Sort of, yeah. I'm not astounded or surprised and yeah, I did.
It's funny. I asked the same question about the town of Aspen. I don't like its success, but I expected it. The streets would get paved.
Yeah, of course I remember there was only one paved street when we first came.
Are you sad that we can't go back, or just as happy that we're paved?
No, I'm a little sad. You know, it used to be that in Aspen there were 4 stores where you could buy mountain boots, right? And now there's only, well, I guess there are 2 now, but.
And 2 of them used to make them themselves in the back room.
That's right, yeah.
If you were to look in your crystal ball, 10 years, would it probably be much like it is now?
Well, if the housing situation holds up, yeah, I think it will be just very similar to what it is now, yeah.
If the Dow Jones goes down, the housing situation may well get better.
Well, maybe. It'll have to go down. That was the last time we had a downward glitch in the Dow Jones, which was, I don't know, sometime during the last year. Things didn't improve in Aspen at all as far as the housing was concerned. I'm not sure that most of these people aren't beyond the Dow Jones.
Well, I just mean the whole country's so optimistic and so willing to spend months at a time out of the office.
Yeah.
Some of these questions I know the answers to. Have you made friends here? Of course you have.
Yes.
Do you feel at all a part of the town?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think of you.
Yeah, no, I do feel part of the town. Even before I owned any property here, I felt part of the town.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the town, how do you think the town regards its physics crowd? Of course, that's a silly question, but
Yeah, well, I think they think we're sort of mysterious and, but very much a part of what they conceive of as being the Aspen spirit of some sort.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's right. We have the Pepke's, like the Circle of Serenity, his soundbite, and we believe in it like it was the second word of God,
Right.
even if it's not true. Do you see anything that we ought to do that you feel a difference with, particularly?
Who's we?
Should the center? Would you like to see the center change its course in any direction?
Oh. No, I mean there is some discussion now of broadening the scientific activities in what we call prime time of the summer, which is July and the early part of August. And that's, if that happens, as by broadening it, I mean encouraging activities in other fields besides the three main ones which I mentioned before. That will change the character of the center somewhat. The different people, they have different ways of doing science, different ways of spending their summer. And so there might be some changes that way, and I don't know whether this will be good or bad. It's certainly something
the bio people would seem to be very different.
That's right.
And they're going strong.
Yeah.
I suppose it's understandable, but the computers, excuse me, the center has never been very interested in computing or encouraging in computing.
Yes, I'm one of the people responsible for that, as you may have surmised over a long association. Although when I'm here, of course, and my laptop is working, which it's now sitting in Apple's factory in Texas being fixed, I'm on it as much as anybody.
Uh-huh. You mean you mind having people bent over computers?
I'm sorry?
You mean you mind it being broken?
I mind it being broken, yes. And when it's here, I'm using it a lot.
Maybe this isn't exactly for the tape, but I'm curious. There's another technology coming along in presenting stuff by virtue of your laptop on a screen, so that when you explain things, you're using a mouse to explain it instead of just the blackboard. Is that going to happen, or is that not likely to happen?
No, it's happening. Not many people, but there are a few people who have their whole presentation on their laptop. They're invited to go give a talk somewhere. They take their laptop with them, and they get somebody to make to arrange to have a projection deal.
Yeah.
And they show all their transparencies or slides, whatever it is, right from the laptop. And then they can use their mouse, as you said, and they can point to it, and it's pretty effective. I mean, the only thing that's wrong with it is the same thing that's wrong with transparencies, is the room gets dark, you're inside.
Right, exactly.
Whereas here, I like talks on the patio, because they're outside, and talks in Fluke Forum are not as pleasant because it's inside.
But some things are so well explained by virtue of animated, complicated presentations.
Well, I'm not sure that
they may not be basic.
I'm not sure that's worth it. I'm not sure it's that much better explained. I mean, it's certainly more attractive, and it's wow. Also,
I see what you mean.
But
I just looked at the Superstring site, and I'm very impressed by it. It's very lively.
Yeah.
And it helped me understand a little more about Superstring.
Yeah, but that's a different thing, right? I mean, that's for people who are not super stringers.
That's right.
And I probably get a lot of it also.
I think you would.
Yeah.
You would. The reason I ask is that I feel a little responsible to help that happen.
Yeah.
Right here is it
No, I think it's very good for people who are not specialists.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it may also be. We had a talk today out on the patio, and so I walk out there, and the screen is down, and there's a view graph there with a long extension cord going into somewhere, and I'm saying, why do we have this here? You know, there used to be a rule at the Physics Center before we had this auditorium. There used to be a sort of a rule that there would be no view graphs or no slides. Every talk was a blackboard talk. And that rule is still sort of in place on the patio, where it's a little difficult to have the screen set up and so forth, and there's too much sun anyway. But this guy nevertheless had all these view graphs, but it turned out that they were totally unnecessary. That is, the talk was not enhanced at all. In fact, it would have been better had he all he did was read the view graph when there was text, and the equations he could have written on the blackboard, and it would have been much better.
Probably, this might be interesting maybe, if the center expands its scope from the three. Some of those others are much more graphical and have to be, because they deal more with data and less with mathematics.
Yeah, also, the experimental astrophysicists are always in here because they need to show data.
Yeah, and you'd want to see Hubble pictures, I presume, just because it's entertaining.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
They're magnificent.
Of course.
Well, it sounds like it's been pretty fun, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been wonderful. I mean, for me, it's just exciting
Are there other
series of
centers
summers.
around the world that are anywhere similar in physics?
Well, there's something that goes on in Trieste every year, but I've never been, so I don't know what it's like. And the Institute for Theoretical Physics in Santa Barbara is actually the way you do science there is very similar, but the arrangements are quite different in Santa Barbara, which has a program all year long. They have long programs rather than shorter workshops. But the interactions at the Institute for Theoretical Physics are very similar to the kind we have here. There's a phenomenon in condensed matter physics called the quantum Hall effect. And one summer, there were a number of people here who were interested in that. And they pioneered the determination of a way of describing the various states of the system which exhibits this particular effect. And that was something that happened because they were here at the Aspen Center for Physics and that they were talking to each other. I mean, it's not the kind of question that you were asking.
I'm probably, it's very close, but I'm probably looking for the inspiration where a person is sitting out there and says, holy mackerel, bingo, why haven't we thought of this or that?
No, but that's what these I don't know, there were 4 or 5 guys. They were sitting out there and they said, oh.
Yeah. Oh.
And they said, we can write this down, and so they did. It was just a diagram, actually. And I mean, I never sat out there and by myself under the tree and had the apple fall and think, oh, now I can solve this problem. So I can't speak for anybody else either.
Okay,
But the other one that's sort of like this thing with the quantum Hall effect was the description of the physics of neutron stars, which maybe somebody has mentioned to you before, which involved 3 or 4 people who were at the Physics Center at that time, and they got together and said, well, we can understand something about neutron stars. And
so to do this, they didn't need reams of data and tons of computing. They
No.
were able to put it together.
Nobody needs tons of computing power, Nick.
I'm in that game, and I can believe that. I can. Especially governments.
Unfortunately.
I sense a tremendous emboldenment in the spirit because we've got the financial thing secure enough. The ground is settled. I feel a great uplift in worrisomeness. There isn't any.
Yeah, well, you're familiar with the apparatus here and with the people who were involved in the scientific and business administration of the center. And certainly the fact that the land was acquired and the building was built, and we did raise the money and we'll be able to pay off our obligations as far as the building is concerned. That's an enormous relief for all of these people with whom you're
who are apparatchiks, not
right,
really
exactly,
physics.
yeah.
I get the impression that the demand for the center is about twice the supply. That is to say, about twice as many people would like to come and scan, or is it 20 times as many people?
No, it's, I don't know, the applications are run between 700 and 900, and the admissions, no, do I have this right? Let's see, 10 weeks, 700, no, I guess we have, yeah, we're admitting around 400 or something like that.
450, I think.
450, and so it's about a little more than half getting.
Which means that a person that's working hard has a pretty good chance to come here in due course, maybe a couple of years.
Right.
That's great. So it's not that
Especially if
exclusionary.
they've never been here before.
Yeah, they get an extra crack at it. That's not so bad. That's not a tidy little club.
No, and the percentage of people who at the center during the summer who have never been here before is running at about 30. About a third of them have never been here before.
Perfect.
Which is, I think, a rather good number.
This is apparatchik stuff. Do you think there's any chance we could build housing for physicists, or is that total insanity? Don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. sounds nutty.
I think it'd be better to buy it than build it, but that's. I think it would be better to have it donated.
Well, I had one thought. This would be a real test. Would the physicists who live here now put in their will that it goes to another physicist, even though it wouldn't sell for as much as if it went to?
No, what they should do now is give it to the Physics Center.
Yeah.
You know, as a, what do you call it, living trust or whatever you call
Yeah.
it, so they can still use it and make the rent and so forth, and get a tax deduction, and we get to use it during the summer, except when they're here.
I think we're going to have to start thinking about things like that.